So another area that relates to PR where you hear different opinions, I'd love to get yours, is whether the press release should be written by an individual or a team. There's pros and cons to both. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think the question should be more who writes it than is it, who or whom write it versus is it an individual or a team? I think the biggest challenge is to get someone involved in writing it who is more of a journalist and can actually put on the hat of like what's going to make it interesting to a reader. Because one of the shifts, I think the two biggest challenges with press releases now is there's this one shift that like it used to be that you wrote the press release for the journalist, then the journalist is going to use the press release to write their story for the audience. So it could be kind of technical and jargony and uninteresting, and it didn't matter because it was just this boilerplate to make the journalist's life easy. But now, of course, consumers can read the press release directly, and you're probably going to push the press release out on your social channels. So you actually got to make it interesting. And the other thing that's my biggest pet peeve about press releases is that nobody puts any work into making the quotes interesting. So if you talk to a journalist, like if you were writing a print article, right, we'd have this conversation for half an hour. And out of that half an hour, I'd say one or two things that are interesting or zingers, and that's what you would quote. And that's what's going to make it a good story, because you're only going to quote the good stuff I say. You're not going to quote the boilerplate company jargon I'm going to say. The problem with the press release, though, is that usually it's like, hey, CEO, can you send us a quote? And the CEO sends like the boring message they want to get out, and no one's there challenging them, being like, no, but what's the thing that you can say that's actually going to be interesting and the reader's going to remember it and take away. And maybe if a journalist sees it, they'll want to copy and paste that quote.
Right.
So I think it's more about just like, how do you challenge yourself internally to make the press release interesting, as opposed to thinking of it as like, how do we get our company boilerplate message out?